The Breakfast Club dropped their interview with Ben Shapiro earlier this morning, and they're already getting a lot of backlash from their audience. So, in this video, we're going to explain exactly why the audience is giving the Breakfast Club backlash and whether or not the backlash is fair. One thing that caught my eye and surprised me was how underwhelming the demand for this interview was. Like, the views is very underwhelming, taking into consideration this is Ben Shapiro. He's like a A-lister. The Breakfast Club are A-listers. So the meeting of the mind, I was expecting to be something that's like tremendous, something that gets a lot of publicity and attention, but it doesn't really look like that's a thing. It doesn't really look like people outside of the people who are angry at it really care about Ben Shapiro sitting down with the Breakfast Club. When you look at the comment section, the recurring theme among the people who are in disapproval of this interview is they don't believe the Breakfast Club was equipped to interview Ben Shapiro. One user said, "I don't think there's anything wrong with having different opinions on the show. What I have a problem with is not having knowledgeable people on the show to offer any pushback. Basically, the Breakfast Club doesn't know enough, so Ben/Candace come across as being correct." I've heard Charlamagne discuss with Andrew Schultz on The Brilliant Idiots that his goal is to get to a point where he can have a late night show, where he can have conversations, and he feels like there's not enough conversations happening in media, and it's all about debating and fighting back and forth. So I'm not sure if that was the intention here, but I feel like it's the Breakfast Club fault that they have essentially set the temperature, and their audience is just expecting that temperature, right? Whenever a conservative voice come on the Breakfast Club is usually combative. They bring on people like Angela Rye to help combat the conservative voice. Whenever it's somebody from the left, is an easy softball interview. They go along to get along. So if that's the expectation from your audience, who they are not really expected to invite or accept opposing views, they're expecting for you to combat and go to war about particular beliefs that they believe y'all share together. So when Ben Shapiro comes on, they're expecting more of the same. And when you don't give them that, this is when you get the backlash. One user said, "This dude went up there and schooled all of you. Y'all let him say whatever he wanted. He thinks he's always right and he's not. Charlamagne only presses people he can take advantage of." One user says, "When Ben talks, you must cut him off with facts or he'll come across like everything he says is true." One user said, "Y'all gave an anti-black, genocide-denying Zionist a platform and didn't challenge him on those points. No one on this show is smart enough for this. If y'all can't hang, then go back to talking about who got a BBL or something." One user says, "Angela Rye was needed because unfortunately this was outside of the Breakfast Club skill set." Another stated, "They picked the wrong person to debate this man. I think Lauren has good points, but girl, this went way over your head." That's one group of the aisle. There's another group in this conversation, and their views are a little bit more extreme. They believe that Ben Shapiro shouldn't be platformed at all. They believe that Ben Shapiro rhetoric is destructive enough to where the Breakfast Club platforming him, regardless of what pushback they give, is not good enough, right? Like they believe that he's so destructive that it's harmful regardless of how you push back against it. One user posted, "LOL, the Breakfast Club can kick rocks. Why are they platforming Ben Shapiro?" Which this does kind of highlight. There is a certain section of the left that don't believe in platforming or debating, right? They're intolerant. Another person stated, "Why the F is the Breakfast Club platforming Ben Shapiro?" Now, like, there's creators like Vosh, right? Who he talks down upon Destiny's approach. Destiny approach is, debate and combating ideas is how you win. Vosh believes when you platform these people, you legitimize them. I believe that's the case for some people, not Ben Shapiro, right? Like I was watching Jubilee, there was one dude who was talking about, "Yeah, I'm a fascist. I'm pro-fascism. I don't believe in like democracy or elections." Once you get to that point, bruh, you're too far gone. I have no interest in ever talking to you. But when you share at least some common ground with someone like Ben Shapiro or Charlamagne the God, I believe y'all can have a conversation and get to the mutual ground. One person says, "The Breakfast Club platforming Ben Shapiro with no pushback whatsoever is effing nuts. Platforming these people is the problem because it legitimizes them." If you're talking about 2018 Nick Fuentes, you got me. Ben Shapiro, but you're not legitimizing Ben Shapiro in 2025. Ben Shapiro is one of the biggest voices in media, in political media. Ben Shapiro is the founder of the Daily Wire. Like, you're not legitimizing Ben Shapiro. He's already big enough to where it's out there and you could combat it if you want to combat it. Now, some of the discussions that Ben Shapiro got the best of the Breakfast Club on that had their audience pissed, I believe, is the abortion debate and what's going on in Gaza. Now, during this debate, I give Charlemagne credit because he was combating Ben. And at some point, I think Charlemagne did kind of put Ben Shapiro in a tad bit of a trick bag, right? But again, they just don't have the wits or the education to really compete or to go toe to toe with Ben Shapiro. So it kind of felt like their intention was a debate, but it kind of felt like Ben Shapiro schooling, and on top of schooling, it kind of, yo, even he didn't respect their intellect or their wits, because even in the discussion, you could kind of hear Ben Shapiro kind of leading them along, like, hey, listen, this is no, right? Like he's kind of coaching them and leading them down, even like their own logic. He's trying to make sure that they understand how to stay logically consistent with their own theory. So Ben is coaching them through their own theory as well as pushing his own. And it kind of felt like Ben was debating his kids, if that makes sense.
Interesting. I want to go back to your book in a second, but I'm glad you said that because you don't think what's happening in Gaza is a genocide.
Correct.
Okay, but the world's leading association of genocide scholars has declared that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza based off the pure definition of.
Well, it's not actually, if you read their actual study, it's not based on the quote-unquote pure definition of genocide. They don't actually even define genocide in the document. And they basically went out to their membership, but they didn't go out to the entire membership. They went out to a generic membership. It is very easy to join the International Association of Genocide Scholars. In fact, there were several people yesterday who just signed up and were immediately admitted, even though they have no actual background in genocide. The question is not whether some sort of coterie of people who call themselves experts in an issue are quote-unquote experts on the issue. The question is whether the definition is met. The definition of genocide is not met in Gaza by any stretch of the imagination. And you can cite to me, a group that I hadn't heard of until 2 seconds ago, and nobody had heard of until 2 seconds ago, that voted in a particular way. That doesn't make a difference definitionally.
So what is a genocide to you?
A genocide is the attempt to forcibly destroy an entire population.
This is why people are saying you kind of have to have somebody there who knows what they're talking about and who's just not reading whatever they read online. Because Ben Shapiro, not only is he well read or he understands the conflict, but he's also been studying his talking points and constructing arguments about this for decades now. So yeah, you read something online you don't really quite fully understand. He can run circles around you, which is what happened here, right? Ben Shapiro just literally said, hey man, if you are bombing indiscriminately, right, in pursuit of a particular opposing enemy force, and you accidentally kill 90% of people, it's not a genocide because your intent was not to kill everybody. This dude is abhorrent.
Which is not what has happened.
So it's not the attacks on like the personal facilities needed for like survival, like healthcare and educational institutions.
Well, again, Israel has shipped in more humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip than literally any army to in a population that supports the enemy in literally all of human history. They've been shipping in about 4,400 calories per day per person into the Gaza Strip in the middle of a war in which the enemy is holding actual Israeli hostages underground who, as we've seen from some of the pictures, are actually starving.
Palestinian children are starving. That's a fact that can't be disputed. But the conversation is larger than that. The conversation actually should start here. Why do Bibi feel like they have the right to dictate what goes in and out? Why do Bibi feel like they have the moral authority to dictate what the Palestinian people should eat or not? Why do they have the right to dictate whether or not a Palestinian child should have maple syrup on his pancakes? They're banning maple syrup and cereal and other things from going in because they believe that maple syrup has sugar, and sugar can be used to create a bomb. So these people are playing God. They believe that they have the right to dictate how these people live, eat, and wipe their behind, even controlling the type of toilet paper that goes in. These are human rights issues that we're discussing. And Ben Shapiro's only defense of this is war's ugly.
Again, none of this is to claim that the war is pretty or meticulous or anodyne, because it isn't. It's really, really, really ugly. But over the course of this war, about 3% of the Gazan population has been killed or wounded. If you're going to look at an actual genocide, obviously the prototypical case being the Holocaust, you're looking at 50% of the entire Jewish population in Europe destroyed. If you're looking at other attempted genocides, say the genocides in Rwanda, you're talking about extraordinarily high percentages of the population that are wiped out. You certainly are not seeing procedures that require 4 layers of actual legal authority in order to do a drone strike. And I've actually seen the tape of them doing this in Israel. They actually, if they spot from the air a terrorist who's going into a particular civilian area, you have to take like a full minute where the pilot on the drone calls up the legal authority, who then calls up the higher legal authority to get clearance for the actual drone strike, and they will call off the drone strike if they believe that the military target is too costly in terms of civilian casualties. I mean, Hamas knows this, which is why they're hiding among civilians. In fact, the best proof that this is not, in fact, a purposeful genocide is the fact that Hamas is hiding behind civilians. The reason you hide behind civilians is because you know your enemy doesn't want to kill civilians. Right? If you believe that your enemy doesn't care about killing civilians, you wouldn't hide among civilians. That wouldn't be a defense mechanism.
Do you think Israel needs a regime change?
I mean, Israel's a democracy. They've had, I think, 5 elections in the last 4 years. There probably will be election again in March. I do not think that Israel would be conducting this war very differently if there were somebody else in power. And
I'm on the side of half the conversation. I'm never on the side of let's not platform this dude unless we're talking about BB. That's the one person, hey, bruh, yeah, keep him away, right? Because I don't care how well read you are on this subject. You don't know more about that conflict than BB. And he's able to manipulate and spin almost anyone. Keep him away unless you're somebody who's well-vetted, a well-vetted journalist who have dedicated your entire life to studying this conflict, and then you can probably combat him in an interview. And for that, I'll probably be okay with. But to put BB on a podcast with Officer Tatum, like the Nelk Boys and others, man, cut it out, bruh. So in this case, I feel like they didn't do their research. They didn't sit with this discussion yesterday or the week before and study in preparation for this. And to their defense, it's kind of difficult because they have multiple shows going on. So it's hard to really dedicate as much time as you want to this particular subject. And you kind of see the difference between people who give talking points for a living and somebody who has dedicated their lives to studying something, okay? Ben Shapiro is Jewish. He has a invested interest in this subject. So, of course, he's probably going to know a little bit more or how to spin you, even if he knows that you're on the right track.
And you believe in banning abortions, right?
I'm pro-life, yes.
Even in cases of incest and rape?
Yes.
Why?
Because this is a sort of a fundamental definitional question. If you believe life begins at conception, then regardless of the source of the life, it now has an independent interest in life. So that is not to minimize the tremendous evil of rape or incest. I believe rapists should be executed, frankly, or chemically castrated at best. But that's sort of a different question from the independent source of life and whether this, again, it gets back to definitions. And this conversation tends to be either you're on one side of that or the other. If you don't believe life begins at conception, then obviously you believe abortion is acceptable in a wide variety of circumstances. If you believe it's an independent life deserving of protection, then you believe it's an independent life deserving of protection.
Lauren, what do you think about that? I'm just as a woman.
I think that a woman should be able to choose to do what she wants to do wherever she decides to do it. I believe that women should be able to abort babies if they want to, if they feel like that's what they need to do.
Do you have a time limit on that, out of curiosity?
I mean, I think it should happen earlier on if it were me making a decision for myself, but I think it's up to the woman and what she's personally experiencing and what she personally went through. I really think it's a per person thing. That's why I think it's crazy when you have like these structures and these like people who are not in that situation making the decision for the woman of what you can and can't do, because it's very like per person. My situation might be different than another woman who's sitting next to me.
Right. So again, this is sort of the definitional issue that we're talking about, because you're talking about what a woman should be allowed to do. And what I'm talking about is the definition of personhood of the separate person inside the woman. I think that what I'd push on is why do you personally believe that a woman should have an abortion earlier?
I think from personal experience, I've been in a situation. I just think emotionally and mentally, it's less that you think about, but it does depend on how you think of when the life is formed or should be looked at as like a life that you
right. So
yeah.
I think is the big question, and that's where the disconnect is.
What I'm saying is that's always going to be different for each person.
But I don't think that the subjective definition of life is how we define life. Meaning that you being uncomfortable with a woman having an abortion in the 9th month, you're saying that just because you're uncomfortable with it, that doesn't mean that you should stop a woman from doing that. My point is that life has a definition, right? We all agree, for example, that a 1-month-old baby should not be drowned. Right? We all agree on that. And that's not up to the personal, should not be drowned. You shouldn't take the baby and drown in a bathtub, right? And the question is, well, why?
On this particular issue, me and Ben disagree vehemently when it comes to whether or not I believe a woman should be forced to carry a child to term that was conceived through unconsensual relations. You know, but even with this discussion, it felt like Ben was having an elevated conversation that Day was having a hard time following, right? And even with Ben and Lauren, Ben was kind of coaching Lauren and walking her through her own philosophy and helping her find exactly what she believes in as the conversation was happening. It didn't feel like he was talking to his equals, you know? He didn't even understand what her own philosophy was yet. Ben asked her, would you terminate your baby at 9 months? She said no, but I don't feel like I should tell somebody else they can't terminate their baby at 9 months. Ben asked why. She says, well, I believe the baby at 9 months is a live being. Then Ben asks, okay, do you believe that you should terminate a 1-month-old infant, like who's been born? She said, no, the baby been born. It's a person, like it's a being. So Ben asks, okay, do you feel like somebody else should be able to terminate or get rid of their baby that's a 1-month-old infant? She said, no. Well, then that's where your logic falls apart. You only say no to the 1-month-old infant being taken away because you acknowledge it's a live being, it's a person, right? So if you don't believe that somebody else should be able to terminate that 1-month-old infant, but you also believe the baby who was 9 months in the womb is also a live being, then why would you believe somebody else should be able to terminate the baby who's a live being at 9 months? Now, again, that's not my own philosophy. That's what Lauren's philosophy is. And it felt like Lauren, she failed to be logically consistent. And that's where I feel like Ben kind of like ran circles around him, because in order to engage like with this subject, you kind of have to be logically consistent, right? Which left a lot to desire from their audience. And now they're running to Twitter with posts like this. This morning, Breakfast Club just gave a known racist, Ben Shapiro, a platform to promote his book, then proceeded to cover Young Thug's street/jail drama. The Breakfast Club works straight for the CIA. Somebody also says having Ben Shapiro on is crazy. Another user says Ben Shapiro was on the Breakfast Club this morning. Why? Someone explained to me why Virgilin effing racist was on the Breakfast Club. Also, whilst explaining that, also explained why no one offered any pushback to his obvious lies and misinformation.